Hey, it's me, Anna. For my former article, I've written about Florida's Native American history. So my key points to my article are four tribes that were located here in Florida. We got the Timucua tribe, also known as the Timucuan tribe, the Seminole, the Appalachee, and the Calusa tribe. The Timucua tribe lived in current-day South Georgia and North Florida. They didn't consider themselves one whole tribe, like we might think of them. They were split up, divided, and they'd often have conflict with one another. Um, they occupied over 19,000 square miles, and they had a population of 200,000 people. But by the 1800s, there were few left, and the remaining were taken in by the Seminole tribe and the Muskogee Creek tribes. This is because the Europeans came and just messed everything up for the Native Americans through disease, genocide. Their spirituality, they had shamans, which was the group's chief, and they held the most religious power. They could predict the future, curse people, control the weather, perform blessings, and cure the ill. Their food, they were farmers, hunters, and gatherers. They grew pumpkins, cucumbers, maize. They even caught oysters and fish and hunted deer, etc. They had generational shells, mounds of shells. So like they would take their oyster shells and they would just put them all in the same place, and eventually it created a mound. And this occurred like they would keep putting shells in the same mound like generations after generations. The clothes, the men wore a loincloth wrapped around their waist. This made it easy for when they were moving in and out of the water. The women also wore a loincloth, and they would have either a deerskin top or a Spanish moss top, which I do wonder how did they not itch all the time from that Spanish moss. During the winter, they would add layers rather than replacing their clothes, so just putting more on and just having everything on underneath. Tattoos were a very big part of their tribe. It was a status symbol. The more someone had, the more status they held. Men and women alike had tattoos. The Seminole tribe, which unlike others was founded in the 1770s because they were formed from a band of Creek Indians in Georgia and Alabama migrating to Florida due to conflicts with other tribes and Europeans. Most tribes that we know and will hear about have been around for thousands of years. The Seminoles had wars with the United States. So their first Seminole War was because President Andrew Jackson invaded Florida, which was Spanish at the time, and attacked the Seminoles and sending them deeper into Florida. The Second War began after the Indian Removal Act of 1830. The U.S. government was trying to relocate the Seminoles to Oklahoma, which they would succeed with, and now, to this day, there is a reservation in Oklahoma for the Seminole Indians. Osceola, he was a very important person during the Second Seminole War, and he was a leader and a very well-respected fighter. He was born a Creek Indian. He was captured during the Second War in 1837, dying soon after in Fort Moultrie in South Carolina. After his death, he earned widespread respect and had several towns named after him, even here in Florida. There was a resurgence of the Seminole Indians after all the wars. The Seminole tribe began reappearing once trading posts became popular. This was like 2 decades after the wars ended. In the 1950s, the Seminoles created their charter due to federal legislation. In 1957, the tribal members voted in favor of a Seminole constitution, making them their own being apart from the government, the federal government. The Appalachee tribe. It's been around since AD 1000, and they live between the Georgia state line and the Gulf Coast. The population was 50,000 people, and this was before the Europeans came, of course. Their agriculture, for food, they grew corn, beans, squash. They would hunt bears and deer and other small game. They were farmers, hunters, and gatherers. Their spiritual traditions. They had a village ball game. which they would play with other villages. It was about 100 people on each team, and they had a ball that they would hit into this basket that had like eagle feathers on the top. And the purpose of this was to bring rain for the crops. They also had ceremonial mounds. These had dwellings at the top for the chiefs and other religious figures, and typically the chief lived on the tallest mound. Their clothes, similar to the Timucua, they had deerskin loincloths, and the females wore Spanish moss skirts. The Europeans. They were the first group of Native Americans to encounter the Europeans. They were, of course, later ravaged by disease brought on by the Europeans. Their descendants. Today there are around 300 descendants, and they're all living in the Louisiana area. The Calusa tribe, also known as the Shell Indians, were located in South Florida, just north of present-day Naples. Their population was also around 50,000. They were considered sophisticated due to their political and social organizations, and they developed elaborate trade networks. They were considered excellent wood carvers, and this is based on some remains found down south in Florida of artwork that they carved. They lived in homes on stilts, and their roofs were made with palmetto leaves. For food, they would make nets to catch fish, and the women and children learned to catch shellfish like oysters, conch, crab, all that. Shells were very important to them. That's why they got the name Shell Indians. They would turn shells into tools, utensils, jewelry, and ornaments, and even spears for hunting and fishing. And this really set them apart from other Native Americans at the time, because at the time a lot of them were using pottery for like tools and utensils and jewelry and stuff. Ancient people. They are believed to be ancestors of the ancient people who migrated to South Florida through the Antilles Islands of the Caribbean, and they figured this out based on how they grew maize like the ancient people of South America. Now for what I've learned. These are my lessons learned. Be prepared, of course. You need to have researched your topic and be well informed on what you're talking about or writing about. And time management is key, because as a college student, free time is a rare sight. So when you get it, you need to make sure that you are just doing best to be prepared for your work. Enjoy writing. I just felt like at some points I was like rather stressed about writing, like I gotta get this done, I gotta do this quick, and I just had to like take a deep breath and remind myself to enjoy the process and just don't get caught up with everything else you got going on. Like just focus on what you're doing right now. To take your time, because if you don't take your time, you're gonna rush it and it's gonna end up not being your best quality. Or if you get like writer's block and you can't think of nothing to write, just take your time or take a break and then come back to it later with a fresh mind. And of course, procrastination is not your friend. You need to not procrastinate, because that produces bad quality work. And you're just stressed and freaking out, and it's just easier on you to not procrastinate. And I have learned this the hard way. Here are some of my best practices that I've learned and used. To use your voice. This way the reader could tell it's a genuine person writing and get a sense of who you are. Like, it just really, putting yourself into your work, it just really gives the reader a chance to really see you and understand you just by how you've wrote. Making sure you have key points. You need to have key points to make sure so you don't ramble on about something off topic. This is, of course, maybe not so much with like writing VOSOTs or VOs, but with like a lot of what we just did, like the final article or the formal article and all these other little things like our LinkedIn projects. Just having those key points and it really gives you like deadlines and topics of like, okay, this is what I'm writing about right now. And then hyperlinks. This way the reader knows exactly what the link is for, and it takes up less space, and it just overall looks better and more classy. So like versus having this long www blah 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 blah, it's just a simple word, and they can click the link and it takes them to get further information. My best work that I believe I did this semester was my first 5 fast facts that I did on the history of the local historical sites here in North Florida. Like this picture is a picture that I took from Fort Clinch and Fernandina, and I talked about that in my fast facts. I got to learn a lot about the history of North Florida, which I really enjoyed. I got to take a lot of pictures, which I also really enjoyed, getting to go visit these places, and I really got to learn like firsthand, and I think that really did help me in my writing because it was just more like ingrained, and I got to experience it so I could be more detailed. I also got to find ways to enhance something that most people find boring. Most people would probably think these historical sites are boring and never want to visit them, but I feel like I got to really, with my writing, I got to enhance these, and maybe people would want to go visit them now. And the overall article's final presentation worked well and was easy to read and find. Just the whole like WordPress thing is the layout, it was just nice and simple. You got the pictures and then the history, and then it's up to you if you'd like to go explore these places or if that was enough for you. Some things that I'm taking with me that I learned in this class is, of course, how to properly write an email. That was very helpful, and I'm using that forever. A better understanding of how to work and run a website. Even though this wasn't like a website-based class, just really being hands-on in the WordPress, like that experience is very valuable to me, especially because I would like to continue a career in communications where I probably will be dealing with websites or running websites. How to write a newsletter. That was something I never thought I would write, and now I have that knowledge, and I feel like I could do it again. And like I said, if I going into communications as a career, that feels like something I might need. And of course, the Anne Hanley book. I bought it, and I'm taking it with me for my own library because it just has a lot of useful tips and tricks for writing. And lastly, we have my favorite quote from Anne Hanley's Everybody Writes. So the quote is, "So the question becomes, are you telling your story from your unique perspective with a voice and a style that's clearly all you?" I just really like this quote because I felt like this is something I just had to really work on this semester, because a lot of the information we're getting is from website sources or like just like boring robot based, it just like reads like a robot. So I just had to find a way to really find my perspective and voice and just enhance my overall work to make it better for my reader. Thanks for watching.